Excellent. Let's get started. So again, welcome everyone to our April edition of Rebels with a Heart, the New Rules of Leadership. Delighted to be here with our panelists today with an amazing group of guests, and I'm eager to share their story. And I think everyone will be just very impressed by the level of purpose and just impact that each of these people are bringing to their life's work and their companies and the work that they're doing in the world. So with that, I would like to open up the conversation and introduce these individuals. So we'll start with you, Kate, if you wouldn't mind. Please just introduce a little about you, your background, your role, and who you are to our audience today.
Kate King, founder of Human on Purpose, and really purpose-driven around advancing human freedom. So one of the things that I experienced in my life, having done a corporate career, was a major burnout moment, and taking that burnout moment into purpose of really creating a company where we have the ability to support mainly women taking their next step to become a greater version of themselves. So it is an honor to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. And we will go over to you, Michelle, as well. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Derek. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Michelle Soraco, Chief Social Responsibility Officer for Televerdi and Executive Director for the Televerdi Foundation. Televerdi is a business-to-business sales and marketing organization that was founded based on the idea of giving women in prison jobs and training and opportunities to continue their careers after release, and all of the support that they need, that we could do two things: build a profitable business and provide the women with the marketable skills necessary to stay out of prison forever. And in 26 years of doing this, we've had phenomenal success and have just started the Televerdi Foundation as a model to take our experience and replicate it in prisons across the country, so that we can provide the opportunity to thousands of women every year instead of just a few hundred.
Incredible. Thank you, Michelle. Looking forward to talking more with you on all these different topics. And David, welcome to you as well.
Hi, thank you, Derek. And thanks for the invitation, and ladies, wonderful meeting with you today. My name is David McKinney. I'm the Managing Director and Executive Vice President at the Wilkinson family of companies. We are a national real estate investing platform, and we're just entering into our 30th year of operating here, and collectively have conducted about $2.5 billion of real estate transactions. We're based here in a small agricultural-based community where most of us grew up in Yakima, Washington. We operate what we consider a purpose-driven real estate platform, and it has to do with the approach that we take to real estate ownership and management. We consider that a 360 impact approach, where we're thinking about a quadruple bottom line: the purpose, people, planet, and profit side of all of this thing, and really focusing on the people that live in our communities of right now 4,000 apartment homes. We really have been focused tremendously on kind of this crisis of isolationism and loneliness throughout the United States, and finding ways to really enhance the experience, not just the amenities, but the opportunities that people have inside of our communities to connect with one another. So I'm happy to be here today and happy to share my thoughts and insights and learn from these amazing ladies here.
Absolutely. Likewise, David. Yeah, and again, for everyone who knows, Derek Lundsten, CEO of LifeGuides. We're a platform that connects people who have been through a life experience or challenge and developed resources and tools with those who are going through the same or a similar experience now to receive peer-to-peer mentorship and support, helping them live happier, healthier, more productive lives, and building happier, healthier, more productive communities. And that definitely will be a topic which we will talk about today. So I'll start off with the question, because each of you mentioned the word in your introduction. I think it's very relevant, because the kind of the theme of this session is, quote unquote, getting the most out of your team. And all of you mentioned purpose. And I want to understand a little bit more about what that means to you personally, how that drives your leadership, and how that applies right now in just the way that you're showing up in your organizations and for your stakeholders after a really unique year plus. So let's start with any one of you can take that question.
You know, for us, I think it has been an interesting year to refocus, considering what I just mentioned, that we're really have been focused previously on combating isolation and loneliness. And this year has only compounded all of that, kind of in different ways, depending on where the communities are located, and the way that people have been kind of locked away for different periods of time due to the COVID crisis. Our approach has always been based kind of on our core values, where we're approaching much of this based on love and building better quality relationships and doing the right thing, building beyond business, some of our core values, and how do we do that? So we took a step back as we tried to describe what in our business is really kind of a commodity, apartment home communities, and what are oftentimes traded without thought and just about profit in mind. And we looked at the way that we were owning and operating these things and really discovered that our approach was different than many others. By taking this approach, this focus on the people, by providing ways for people to connect, reasons for people to connect, better places for people to connect with one another, that were designed to, build a greater sense of community. So our purpose is more than just the financial gains of this commodity, but to describe and to pursue, just a better quality of life for the people that are living in our communities, to create centers of human flourishing.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Michelle or Kate, would you like to chime in on this topic?
Yeah, I think, look, 2020 was an interesting year, and I am probably one of the few people who have the opportunity to say that it's been one of my best years ever. And it's been one of my best years because, at the beginning of 2020, our CEO, she took a bold action and asked me to start the Televerdi Foundation. And so, as a company for 25 years that has been providing opportunities to incarcerated women, she looked at it and said, how do we scale this, and how do we do more, right? It's always been about the purpose, but how do we take what we've been doing and reach more people? And she asked me to start the Televerdi Foundation, and the purpose was twofold, right? It was, one is to make sure that we were providing the women of Televerdi with all of the personal and professional development, training, and support they needed to successfully transition out of prison into professional careers. But then also, how do we take these years of experience that we have in doing this and replicate it in a model that would enable us to reach more people? So, there's 81,000 women who get out of prison every year, and, they all want and deserve the opportunity to have a better life and to have a career. And so, that's what I have been able to spend the past year doing, is developing the model that would enable us to create workforce development centers in prisons all over the country, and build the team and the curriculum and the infrastructure to be able to do that. And so 2 weeks from now, we will be opening our first workforce development center that will specifically provide, training and opportunities for women who don't have the opportunity to work for Televerdi to get certified and transition back into the community with the support and the services that they need to become professionals.
That's awesome. Thank you, Michelle. And Kate, I'd imagine that last part that Michelle shared especially resonates with a lot of your work as well. So you want to share both professionally that part, but also for you personally. I know purpose is a big part of your identity. So
yeah, absolutely. I think, I share with the other panelists, with David and Michelle, that 2020 has been a year where, it's never been before, right? We've had to go a lot in. We've been in isolation. We've been really at thought with ourselves, with what is going on and what's important. And I think many people have already asked what's important now, and that what's important has led to a lot of purpose and values and trust with what people are looking for as they interact with companies, as they interact with friends, as they come back out, if you like, to the world. And people have had the chance to really have that reflection. And certainly the clients I've been working for, the purpose around Human on Purpose is really advancing human freedom. And that freedom is having a voice, is actually stepping into your own power, to come out, to connect, to actually, from a societal and community standpoint, really give more energy to that and be in partnership We say, you know, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, arm in arm with our fellow humans in actually lifting us all together. And I think that more and more people are emerging from that, really questioning what is this about now? What is the new normal? What is, you know, all of these things at a society as well as a local, as well as a heartfelt level. So I absolutely share with the other panelists that it's a new ball game emerging, which is exciting and very purpose driven.
Yeah, and I think another theme that I'll just kind of call out that you were all expressing, and back to the title around getting the best of your team, is really, you all mentioned the concept of giving, right? That you literally, Kate, you mentioned the word literally. Michelle, you talked about giving opportunities. David, you talked about giving to your community through love and through service. I mean, I do think that that is a big shift psychologically, or from a community standpoint, or from a business standpoint as leaders. How are we giving proactively? How are we giving back? Not just giving back, but giving proactively to create and build back better, as they say. And so as you kind of consider that, when you know, how are you, as you, to your point, taking the time to reflect inwardly, how are you showing up now as we reintegrate into this, you know, in-person reality after being quarantined for a year? What do you want to give individually to your people as leaders? Like, what are you prioritizing? And again, any one of you can chime in.
Yeah, at Human on Purpose, I think it's prioritizing voice. You know, when we look to large societal changes, and, you know, I'm a big fan of the Edelman Trust Barometer. So I always look to that. They've been going about 21 years, and they're really looking at what are the changes in trust in our society. And this all trickles down to what we do at an individual level. The trust is, you know, businesses, governments, there's a whole changing environment happening, right? We're coming out, and businesses are being asked to step up more. They're being asked to take a stand in society, to understand what's going on. I mean, we look at this around us all the time, and this is really emerging. So as we go to heartfelt leadership, really that human shoulder to shoulder, having voice, having platforms in which to have a discussion. Sometimes, you know, in the past, companies would have done like, oh, I'm not sure this is really us. Right now, it's like we're all in this together. We're emerging as the new normal. We're coming out of isolation. Heart is really where it's at, and having where we need businesses to step up to bring community together. I think we're seeing that. We're seeing it all over the Wall Street Journal. CEOs are stepping up and having a voice. They're protecting some things that we all hold. And if you take that all the way down to the local level of us, right, coming out is, that this is a different arena now. This is about being purpose. This is about having real clarity on taking care of humans in a new way, which actually will uplift innovation, uplift profit, right? So it's really a care and belonging environment versus a short-term corporate results environment that we've all lived through many, many, many years. So you can see I get ultra passionate about
I love your passion, Kate. Yes, we always have fun conversations. So yeah, David,
yes,
Michelle, please chime in on this. Yeah.
You know, for me, it is, you know, Televerdi's been in this space and doing this for so long, for so many years. You know, and the big things that we're doing is like, how do we give more than what we've ever been able to give before, right? And it's not just giving the opportunities, but how do we give more women the voice, right? To use your phrase, right? So you know, we're dealing with a population of women who don't have a voice. You know, we lock people up and we put them aside and we forget about them, and so it's going out and raising awareness for the fact that they're there, and asking businesses to get involved, right? So that's what, you know, that's what the model is all about. And I've been preaching this for, you know, a couple of years now, is that in order for us to solve this issue of mass incarceration, and we need businesses to get involved, because, you know, the number one predictors for recidivism is low income and joblessness. And so the only way that we can solve that problem is for businesses to step up and say, let me embrace this workforce. Diversity and inclusion means including everyone. And, you know, we live in an environment where we've made it, this is one piece of our population that it's socially acceptable to exclude. both while they're in prison and after their release. And it's time for people to make this part of their diversity and inclusion. And so I'm kind of out there being a little bit of the gadfly on that topic.
Yeah. That's great, Michelle. And Kate, you had mentioned the word trust, and that was something I was thinking about this morning as we were, as I was preparing for this. And I think that really, it's really kind of the key, right? Not just in terms of dealing with our team, but in terms of dealing with our clients. That's the reason that they do business with you to begin with. And if you can approach it from that standpoint, through building trust, by being empathetic, and I love the idea of voice, and it's something that we've been able to incorporate into what we do. We've taken the last year where kind of our transaction volume was reduced, where we kind of sat on the sidelines and waited to take a deep dive and start what's called the traction process, kind of rethinking about our entire group, the way that we approach one another, the way that we are approaching our employees and our support team. And really what's been kind of born out of that is this idea where we're given kind of this platform of this voice where we can talk more about our feelings and our vulnerabilities and be kind of more open and honest with one another about the things and about the direction maybe the company's headed, or the way that, you know, cause and effect, I guess, is you know, and be more intentional about our approach to everything, not just what's happening on site in our properties, but what's happening on site in our company, what's happening with our remote workers. And it's been kind of a breath of fresh air that I would expect we would continue to move on with. Not to say that things were closed off before, but I think it's just hit a new level of openness and transparency, which has been, I think, much appreciated by one another. And one of the things we're doing is discussing with our team ways to you know, to promote and foster kind of that open and transparency. I want to know from my team what I can do to better support them in their roles in support of us and our goals. So it's been a good year to be reflective and intentional.
Yeah, I
absolutely.
think, sorry,
That's
Derek,
it.
I was just going to
Go ahead.
add to that, you know, one of the themes coming through is, you know, I grew up in a corporate environment where you didn't really show emotion, right? Emotion in the workplace was you know, and I think humans are naturally, you know, emotive. That's how we communicate, is through emotion, and being able to be heard, being able to have a platform to be listened to be able to contribute, to able to lift each other is emotion. And I think, you know, that trust in being able to, number one, show it, number one, be it, and number one, and thirdly, being accepted for it. I think as we all the four of us are talking is the critical agenda in trust. And I can show up as me, right? I can be me and not have to pretend or be someone different in this environment, which ultimately lifts everybody.
Right.
Is that a rising tide? That line.
Absolutely. Yeah, so to that note, I mean, we've talked about this independently at times, but I mean, the concept of the whole person, and now seeing, literally we're in each other's homes right now, right? We're seeing all elements of each other, of our colleagues, of our friends, of our customers. It's changed the way that people interact and communicate at a different level. I mean, and I think it just goes back to as well, the concept of resilience and overcoming, which we talk about a lot, and we've all talked about this independently as well. How is your own personal resilience kind of reflecting in the work that you're doing with your teams today, right? How is that story, that voice that you share, kind of coming through, and how are you using that as a vulnerability, as a way to ground and build trust in a level that accelerates both the purpose and growth of your businesses and your own individual leadership capabilities?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been integrated self. Right, I say integrated self because, to your point, right, we're seeing each other in homes, we're seeing dogs, we're seeing kids, we're seeing, you know, I've got construction going on. I'm like, hey guys, can you just hold off 2 seconds? You know, our whole environments, but that integrated self of showing up as who I am with, you know, my being a mom, being a friend, being a leader, being all of those integrated self actually gives more to the environment that we have. So certainly, you know, it's given permission to be able to be a whole self and come in and, you know, almost get excited about seeing a child in the background, like, oh, there's humanity in our business meeting. This is so awesome. And then bringing all of that together, which actually makes it more of, you know, a belonging environment where we can share life. So, you know, for I think this integrated self of being able to show up and be self, and see all of the calamity of humans that go with that in a beautiful way, makes for good, certainly from an innovation standpoint, right? When we look to metrics, innovation, being able to bring self, not having to worry about how I look, what I'm saying, but bringing whole self, is certainly what we are doing. And I'm seeing many, many leaders, many companies who I talk to really just being, yeah, it's great when we see the kids now. It's great when we see a partner. It's great that, oh, you've got PJs on, right? It's all good. It's all good in the world. We're just doing business.
Right.
So I mean, I'll bring a kind of a different flavor to it. It is about being our real selves, right? And being our true authentic self. So, you know, the model of Televerdi is near and dear to my heart, and I'm super passionate about it because I started my career with the company 22 years ago while I was serving a 7-year prison sentence here in the state of Arizona. And for 20 years, that was my own dirty little secret. And I went to business meetings every single day and talked about the business of Televerdi and how important it was, and sold to organizations on partnering with Televerdi. And but never did I share my story, right? Never did I sit in a business meeting across the table from another C-level executive and tell them that, hey, I too am formerly incarcerated and this model matters to me, and this is why. And I first started coming out and sharing that story openly, not even 2 years ago. And what I found as I've done that, you know, the first time that you take a stage and you share something so intimate, so personal, and so shameful is frightening. And but what I learned is that when I tell my story, I allow someone else to own their own truth. And that is powerful. That's where we become real people, and we connect with other human beings on a real personal level. And business is business, but being real and being true and being authentic and connected with other individuals is really where the magic happens. And I think that's what 2020 in this past year has really been all about. You know, I have, since that first time of telling the story, I now share it freely and openly and publicly, but the experience is still the same. And when each person shows up in these meeting rooms and these Zooms and can be comfortable being their own true authentic self, then we really make great strides in how we achieve purpose and how we achieve kind of more in the world in being connected.
Yeah, that's great, Michelle. I think sharing our personal vulnerabilities goes a long way to building that trust, the thing we were talking about before. I look at it, I think, in teams, you know, in the context of what's changed in this last year. And for me, my biggest team is my family, right? My wife and my kids, and what we're doing here and how that's all changed. And it's allowed me to kind of refocus and reemphasize and figure out how to, you know, use that process trickle down, you know, whether it's, you know, parenting with love and logic, and about how to deal with, you know, promoting the idea of success within team members and things like that. That, you know, to put it into context for this last year, you know, between January 1st and March 6th, I had racked up like 30,000 miles in the air last year, and I have not gone anywhere since. So my role in the home has changed significantly. It's allowed for a greater reflection, more healing, differentiation of roles. My wife was a mortgage banker and involved in a political campaign in this last year. So we've had a lot of different things kind of happening, but kind of going through that experience, changing roles, being reflective, thinking about these things has helped me, I think, approach my team a little bit differently also, and share, my experiences with them. We're promoting, within our team, greater self-awareness, fitness, wellness, utilizing services like LifeGuides. And it's been a real way for us to, I think, approach our vulnerabilities, share our successes, our failures, and it's been a great way to, I think, demonstrate to our kids the resilience that it can be, but also to our staff. We're working on, again, some people that are finding themselves that they're working far better remotely, or that they prefer to work in the office, and so building different kind of contextual approaches for each of those, and our acceptance of that has been good. So
yeah. Well, so a couple of things. So David, thank you for sharing that, and I'll come back to that in just one second. And Michelle, I also want to just again acknowledge you and your courage and your sharing so openly. Every time I've heard the story, I just feel that such a connection with your heart with that, and just want to honor that. And also, I think you kind of raised the point. I mean, why 2020 is such a great year when you contrast the reflection that you talked about, David? Because I traveled a lot, and I've been able to be home with my wife and kids all the time and have a lot more time to think and be present and reflect and really be intentional. And Michelle, to your point, like bringing it back, is that you actually have the time to literally be, alone with your thoughts, so to speak, and restricted from doing that. So quarantine, in a way, felt liberating. I would imagine liberating, comparatively speaking. And so to contrast that type of experience, I would love to hear your perspective on that. But then also, the word that was mentioned, I think, is relevant for all of us. David, you mentioned is healing, right? And the role that we can play, and one of our advisors read the book Healing, the Healing Organization, is our role as leaders in helping to heal ourselves, heal our companies, heal our team members, heal our communities. And that's the work that ultimately I think we're doing. And Kate, I know that's something that we've talked about. Part of your inspiration was your own healing and your physically, and that led you to your path, right? So I mean, I think that's a topic that I want to just invite into the conversation too, wherever that pops for each of you, because I think that probably brought up a few different thoughts as I was talking.
So I kind of go back, right? Like being liberating, being alone with your thoughts, just like everybody else, 2019, even the first half of 2020 it was all in the air, right? And it was fun, right? When you travel, it's exhausting, but it's also fun. There's a lot going on, but you're always on the go. You're always on the go. You're always on kind of the next thing, the next talk, the next space. As has happened multiple times in my career, when I was asked to start the Televerdi Foundation, it was not something that I wanted to do. When I was asked to do that, I said, never in my wildest dreams did I ever want to start, work in, or have anything to do with a nonprofit. I was a business person, right? But it's almost like duty called, like some certain key things happened and there was no other choice but other than to embrace it and say, I have to do this because it's what the women need right now. And if it's not me, then who, right? So, and it was that, that first, because it was March 1st that I accepted the job, right? And it was that time that said, let me focus on what really matters, right? Like what matters to the people, right? Like, so all this noise aside, there's all those things, like one by one, each trip is canceled, each thing is canceled. And it's that ability to be laser focused on something. But then also as we came out of that next thing, I think the world was changing right away, because the amount of people and that immediately got behind what I was doing was almost like an idea whose time has come, and the support that has come during this time when we're locked down. We've been able to deliver an amazing reentry program. You know, our second graduation is next week, and 60 people will have gone through our reentry program virtually. Right? When people couldn't even go into the prison, we were finding ways to be able to still go in and provide support. And it forced us to develop programs that we could deliver to people virtually, which hadn't been done before. So it's been, I think that's what 2020 is all about, is rethinking the way that we do things to be able to reach more people more effectively.
Completely agree. And I love that quote, by the way, Victor Hugo, the quote about nothing more powerful than ideas, time has come. So well said.
Yeah, thank you.
Kate or David?
Yeah, I think, you know, to add to the idea whose time has come is humans, right? There's an idea. And to your point on healing, the integrated authentic self, right? So if you look to the key areas of healing or the key areas of being human, it's my health, my wealth, my community, my love, and wisdom, that learning. I'm constantly evolving and learning and getting involved, and they have to be balanced with your authentic self. And I think that healing comes when you don't trade wealth for health, when you're not, you know, in health only and not thinking about your wealth strategy or how you're going to earn money, how you're going to contribute, when you don't contribute to your community or find time for relationships, or indeed find time to learn new skills, right? We're in an environment where data and information is coming at us all the time. And I think out of the 2 million bits per minute, per second, we retain what, 126 as humans, something like that, right? So we constantly need to refresh those 126 bits that we're coming in at any one time, which is that learning piece. And with the data and the information coming means we are evolving all the time. But evolving with the healing is balancing. Right? Am I making the contributions that I want to? Am I taking care of my health? Am I able to show up every day and serve? Am I able to really know and have self-agency and say, this is what I want, not what I have to do or what other people expect of me, but this is what I want. To Michelle's point, when you're able to share your truth and come to your authentic self, everything else just gets risen. So the idea whose time has come, I love that, because I'm like, yes, it's finally time to be humans and heal and really take us to the next level of evolution of where we're going.
Amazing.
So thank you, Kate, and I agree. So from that perspective, back to on a practical level, right? As we're going back into in-person, and we're going to be doing more traveling and more events and bringing back some of the old business world. How do we maintain the lessons of introspection? How do we maintain that connectedness, that togetherness, that authentic sharing? How do we make sure to reinforce that those behaviors of leaders continue to grow and accelerate? And what are you doing personally to help foster that within your organizations or within your communities? I think that's another topic I want to get into, is just beyond your organizations, communities is something that all of you have expressed multiple times in this conversation. How does that translate into the extension of your work?
You know, for us, I mentioned this traction process that we're going through and defining things, redefining things like our core values and making sure that we're focused on the same thing, the same direction. We want to identify our niche. We want to identify our marketplace and how we go about doing things and documenting processes. And part of that is going through and documenting, at least for what we're doing, with the way that we're engaging with our employees, the way that we are allowing them the feedback, the opportunity to discuss, the opportunity for them to tell me how I can do a better job supporting them, like I mentioned before. I find that oftentimes that we're not disciplined in the way that we're reviewing or providing feedback to our employees or holding them accountable. I think that they like a certain amount of accountability, though goal setting is often difficult, right? It's hard for us to put on paper something that we want to commit to. But by documenting the way that we're about to do these things, I think is creating that sense of accountability to hold to kind of these new expectations and some of these new standards, at least that we're looking at. I want the feedback from my folks. I want them to tell me where I'm failing them and where I can be a better leader, be a better mentor, better coach, find opportunities myself, the way that I've kind of approached, and I've always not been very good at it, but more recently I'm taking a different approach and having some time to, I guess, explain the thought processes behind some of the decisions that I'm making when I'm presented with some of the questions that I'm presented with. Rather than saying, nope, do it this way, I take the opportunity to go through with the people that are working for me to explain why I'm looking at it from this perspective, and hope, I think, with the intention that that just opens their perception to the idea of what it is that we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. You know, and anyway, from my perspective, that's what I'm committing to, I guess, to you know, keep those doors open.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
You know,
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that question, you know, so
sure, yeah.
So there's a, and you could say David was unpacking, and so you know, I'm going to unpack my baggage a little bit for you too. And so you know, it's about, for me, it's about I'm building something new that hasn't been done before in a space that I haven't worked before, right? I mean, it is in a space that I've worked before, but it's doing something different. And so for me, you know, I've brought on a team, and you know, I would say differently, like one of the things I say to my team now is like, look, we're all in this together. Right? Like, this is, just because I was appointed to lead this thing doesn't mean that anything. We're marching on this path together. And that's the way I think, and that's the way I want me and my team to approach what we're doing. However, I have to go back and regularly, and that's where I was this morning. I did my hike up to the top of South Mountain this morning, so that I had to do some reflection on, am I staying true to, that's my plan and my path for this particular endeavor, right? For this endeavor, or am I gravitating? Am I going back to my natural state of my traditional mentality of, you know, I'm leading a team. I used to run the customer service organization for Televerdi. I had a team of about 60 people, high stress, high pressure job for every single person involved. And sometimes it was like this, you're just making decisions. Like, look, we just got to do the right thing to get to the next thing, you know? And, you know, and always focused on the next thing and solving the next problem. And so I'm right now in that space of taking a step back and saying, have I fallen back into that mode of management? Am I so focused on my long-term outcomes that I'm forgetting about the short-term impact on the people closest to me? And so for me personally, it's about making sure that I'm doing that introspection and inspection, and making sure that I am living true to, you know, the beliefs and the model and the vision that I want for my team and for my business.
Yeah. Real quick, I heard to interject this thought, something you said. So, and it's kind of come up a few times. David, you mentioned the concept of accountability, and Michelle, you were really highlighting the need to just make decisions and make the right call and get things done. I think that's an important part of good business. You personally have also seen the role. I mean, when I think of people who have been incarcerated, we know statistically a lot of the people come from backgrounds of trauma and other events, and just the fact of being incarcerated is fairly traumatic. How do you balance, and how do we use the lessons of that in the context of what's happened over the last year? Like, this has been, for many people, the consequences of the pandemic have been traumatic, and the balance of loving support with you know, the right level of push and stretch and growth. It's a really, I feel like you have some best practices you might be able to share. And David, I know we've talked about this in the past with the work on ACEs that you've done with youth and so forth. I mean, I think this is something that, back to that community element, maybe there's lessons that you've been able to kind of put that through, Michelle, that would be helpful for our audience here. Yeah.
So before I answer to that, I want to preface it with the long-term impact of COVID-19 on our incarcerated population won't be known for years to come, because as much as all of us have been isolated in our own way, we had this, right? We had these Zoom meetings, we had phone calls, we had tech, we had a lot of things. We were home with our children, homeschooling them, or for those that, right? The people who are incarcerated for the past now 14 months, 13 months, have been isolated from their families, right? The women have not seen their children. Whereas, you know, families would be coming to see their loved ones on a weekly basis or monthly basis, maybe even just on annual basis for holidays or whatever it is. But it's now been over a year since these women have been able to hold their children in their arms. It's been a year since those children have been held by their mothers. So there's like, sorry, there's like massive impact, right? That's going to come from that. But it's, in that is how we've been treating and operating and working with these women today, and also in the past. And it's through, you start with, there's a lot of people who have struggled in COVID, in their own comfort, in their own self-confidence, in, you know, you think about people who have lost jobs, or, you know, have left the workplace because they couldn't keep up, and all the different issues that have people, you know, there's been a lot of, we know, mental health issues, the alcohol, the drugs, all the issues that this has brought on. Well, that's all the stuff that we've been dealing with in the prison. And it really starts with respecting the person, and respecting the person with where they are today. And then helping them rebuild, right? Like, that's the number one thing that the women, the incarcerated women will tell me, or formerly incarcerated women will tell me, when I ask, what's the number one thing that you got from Televerdi? What was the number one thing that Televerdi gave you? Nobody tells me it was job skills or communication or any of that. The number one thing everybody tells me is that I got my self-confidence back, or I developed self-confidence that I never had. And I think that's the thing that we have to take away, is how do we enable people who need it to regain that confidence, to regain that comfort, and to come back into the workplace and to come back into the community.
Very powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Michelle. Kate or David, anything you want to add or clarify from your perspective on this?
No, I think, sorry, Michelle said it really eloquently. I think, you know, it's that being heard and accepted. And, you know, we're talking a lot about diversity and inclusion and what that means coming out of COVID, but it's that equity piece, right, that we need to start having conversations about, the equity to bring everybody up together, to have voices heard, to be inclusive of those, to give support, to enable people to sit in their own self and being given tools, technique, leadership, voice to be able to gain the confidence to even emerge. So I love, and Michelle, thank you for sharing the heartfelt moment there, because it's, you know, it brings us all back to why we're here.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's providing people with the tools to be self-confident, right? And from the time that they're young to the time that you're mentoring them along. And providing them the self-confidence provides them then with the key to be able to make decisions that they can be confident, right? That helps streamline business. It helps, you know, everything can continue to work. Now, you know, we've talked about isolationism, we've talked about loneliness, particularly concentrated here in COVID. And you mentioned ACEs, so I'm going to touch on that just for a second here. And for those who don't know, these are adverse childhood experiences, and they're kind of a leading indicator of who ends up where, right? And so, you know, on a scale of 1 to 12 of these ACEs, if you're hitting 5 of them, you're likely more than others to end up incarcerated. And as a kid who had experienced 7 or 8 of these ACEs, it is, you know, provides me, I guess anyway, with the empathy to think about things from a kind of a different, unique perspective. And as we look at our employees, and as we look at the people that are residents of our communities, figuring out ways that we can support those issues that they face is important to us. One of the things that's been difficult, I think, as a result of COVID with the isolationism is these kids who are at home. And what we're finding, and this is maybe a completely side topic, but we're finding that referrals to Child Protective Services are down by about 60%. Mm. And what that means is that the kids that are in environments that are likely more high stress right now, right? That are parents who are out of work, kids that aren't showing up to online class. There's these ghost kids that, you know, they're not getting referred, though you're knowing that they are having even more of these adverse experiences at home. And it's really sad to see what's happening. Anyway, I'm getting on a tangent. I'm very sorry about that.
Oh, it's fine, David. Feel free to continue. This is part of what the Rebels series is about.
Yeah.
So you can, yeah.
Well, and I'm hoping that we can get to a point where we get at least the schools, and I know we're making a lot of progress, but we're not quite there. Getting schools reopened, getting the kids back in to learning environments and doing what we can. What we are doing, I think as a team, Friday, we've got two big things kind of going on next week as we talk about with our team and you know, other people. We're hosting a YWCA luncheon, which is, you know, Dave Navarro, whose mother was killed by a you know, violent ex. We're hosting a luncheon and learn for our team to experience a little bit more about that, hear a little bit more about that. But we're building some desks with the help of Rotary next Friday for kids that aren't coming to school, for kids that are vulnerable, kids that don't have a place to study at home while they're not allowed to come to school. So we're working on different things to build greater awareness of our teams, of these things that are happening. Shifting kind of the perspective and hopefully getting people to think about this stuff and be more empathetic about what's happening and be more creative about ways that we can approach these different issues. Tangent, sorry.
No, it's actually very relevant, and kind of I'll kind of incorporate before I do that. Any thoughts, Kate or Michelle, and David shared before I kind of pose another thought?
No, I just want to say, David, I didn't think that was a tangent. It was something that is important that I think a lot of people are not thinking about. And I felt your heart in the conversation. So thank you for opening up and sharing that with us.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to kind of incorporating the question from the audience here about building bridges in the face of struggle, indifference, and adversity. I think all three of you have tremendous strength, and that's been proven in many different ways. But I think you're right, Michelle. It kind of invites the question is, how do we, you know, as leaders and organizations, translate that into our communities? How do we take that personal responsibility and cultivate that in our teams and our cultures to, you know, to play a more active role in these communities? How do we take ownership where there's been a lack of it to raise communities up and to make a difference, right? And I think that's just a comment that I would make, that each of you really does a good job. But I'd ask the question: do you personally have a point of view on what's allowed you to build through that face of struggle and difference and adversity in your own lives? Like what's been that differentiating thing for you that might be helpful to someone else who watches this session now or in the future?
You know, it's I think a tough one to think about, right? You know, when you look back on your life and you say, you know, when I was at my lowest point, what was there, right? And this is a completely random story, but during the pandemic, I went out for a bike ride right? Because that's what we do to get outside, right? I went out for a bike ride and I was riding my bike along the canal. I live right along the canal. And I'd set out that morning with the intent of doing a 10-mile bike ride. And I was traditionally distracted, as I typically am. I had my phone in my little cup holder and I went over to adjust the sound on it so I could hear the music, and actually rode my bike into the canal. And it was not a big canal, so it's not like I was awful, but it was humiliating. It was shocking. It was everything that's wrong with me in my life and the things that I do. And oh, by the way, there I was in the canal with my bicycle and I had to get out. And there was no one around on a canal where there's normally hundreds of people riding their bikes and walking their dogs, no one around. And I had to figure out how to get out of this canal. Get my bike up. I get my bike up out of the canal. I get myself out of the canal, and I have two choices at that moment. I can turn around. I can go home. It's soaking wet, muddy, or I can get on my bike and I can continue my ride. And I don't know that I consciously, like how consciously I made that decision, but I got on that bike and I continued that ride and I did my 10 miles. Wow. And I got back to my house. My bike was muddy, things were bent, I was soaking wet, my shoes were wet. And I walked into the house and I said to my husband, I'm like, I just want you to know that I fell in the canal. The moral of the story is that as I reflected at the end of the day on why did I do what I did, like what made me do what I did, it's something that is inherent in me or that I've developed over the years, and I guess you just call it grit. And it's the setting my sight on something and then just saying, you know what, failure is not an option. And I think what it is that we have to help other people develop their grit, because grit is good. You know, there's good grit and there's bad grit. And if you can develop good grit, it's what gives you what you need to get through everything. And so it's the more that we can do to encourage people to overcome and push through those difficult moments is what helps them to develop their grit. And that's what I had in my worst moments, was someone who was there for me saying, look, you can do it. Just do it. Right. And so yeah. I don't know. It's the best I got for that story. Sorry.
It's a great story. Thank you. It says a lot about you. Thank you for telling that story.
Yeah.
I think for, when I think about, how you emerge from some of your dark moments, for me, it was to be more aware and to be more present. And, one of the books that I first picked up was Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now. And it was really staying in, okay, I don't have to deal with yesterday. I don't have to deal with tomorrow. I just need to deal with today. And I just need to stay present in the moment, and things are not burning in the moment. They are not crashing down in the moment. And then from being present, my awareness grew. And I think that's really the key right now, is to, as we go out to our communities, as we start really engaging more, is to be present and aware, just to slow down, even like talking to my daughter, like, not in a rush to get things done for business, like just take a second, like checking in. Hey, let's have some time without phones, right? Let's do the tech-free Sundays.
Yeah.
It's always a challenge with a teenager. But it's that presence and awareness as we get back out there, to listen and just stay in the moment. So, from the unpacking of that question, for me, it was definitely presence and awareness. And I think they're so critical as we go back out, that we had that and can give people the platform for that.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
Dave, we'll wrap with you. I mean, you mentioned personally having experienced a number of those ACEs. What was the deciding factor that got you to where you are? I mean, you similarly had this life of overcoming, right?
Kate, you had mentioned, as humans, we want to be emotive. And I think that's absolutely true. I think I can be hyper emotive at times, but not necessarily funneling the right response, or traditionally maybe didn't. it was a kid who didn't have a lot of self-confidence, didn't have a lot that, you know, of trust. I didn't have, you know, necessarily the people that I wanted to be able to believe in, or that believed in me. So I tended to maybe make bad decisions, be depressed. There was, I think for me, there was a catalyst in my life that changed a lot of things. And it had to do with, I'd married relatively young at 25, but it wasn't a great relationship. We had, you know, several years, 12, 13 years later, had a son who died. And it was an accident. My ex-wife was an alcoholic, and it had to do, that alcoholism is what was the factor that changed our life and our trajectory. And it was something that I chose to embrace and to be able to tell my story. And I think through that story sharing, I was empowered to share more about myself and more about my history. And it allowed me to be more reflective and be able to make, you know, become more self-confident and be in a spot where I could own my vulnerabilities and my deficiencies, and really work on myself, and discover more about myself, what my love languages were, and how love languages affect not just our partner, but our relationship with our kids and our relationship with our coworkers, and how all that, you know, interconnects and works well together. The catalyst in my life really, though, was that being able to tell my story. And it was a realization that you really have kind of at a crossroads, you really have two opportunities. You have an opportunity to embrace it and share that of yourself, right? And help lend perspective to how people might approach you, or you can turn and run away from it, right? And in that, there's no growth, there's no reflection, there's no understanding, there's no opportunity to be empathetic with other people with where they're coming from. So for me, that was in my personal life, but what really changed, and that was, you know, 15 years ago now.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you for sharing that, and for sharing yourself with everyone on this call and with our audience as well. And I just want to, again, just thank each of you and all of you, just how much I appreciate each of you, knowing you personally and just getting to know you and your work and your background, your stories. You're all just exemplars of conscious leadership and this rebel leadership concept that we've been advocating. And I'm just excited to be here to support you on your journey and to help you with the work that you're doing in your community. So I honor you all and thank you all, and I'm here to support you. So thank you. And everyone, thank you for joining us again for our Rebels of the Heart segment. As always, it's been an amazing conversation. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Bye, ladies.
Bye-bye.